for some reason, I thought you were going to be taller.
Me too.
Me too.
The smile was a mask. For 30 years, Johnny Carson greeted the biggest stars on earth with a cool Midwestern charm. But as the applause died down and the commercial break began, that mask would sometimes slip. He saw the real faces of Hollywood's elite, the narcissists, the bullies, and the downright cruel. He kept a secret list, a mental tally of the Golden Age giants who were, in his private words, monsters. Now the secrets from behind his famous curtain are out. We are counting down the 9 guests who made Johnny Carson's life a living nightmare. When comedy and crooning collide. Johnny Carson's Tonight Show was the ultimate destination for stars, a place where a 5-minute chat could redefine a career. But not all things are what they seem. For Carson, some of the biggest names brought the biggest problems, and few were bigger than Frank Sinatra and Jerry Lewis. These weren't just guests, they were forces of nature who expected the world to bend to their will, and Carson's studio was no exception. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and the thing nobody tells you is how close these segments came to completely falling apart. Let's start with Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board. To the public, he was the definition of cool. But behind the curtain, Sinatra was known for a volatile temper and an entourage that treated him like royalty. Carson, a man who valued professionalism above all else, couldn't stand it. He famously hated performers who traveled with a massive crew, and Sinatra was the king of the posse. Sources from the show said that when Sinatra was booked, it was an all-hands-on-deck emergency. His demands were endless, his mood was unpredictable, and he treated the staff with a chilling level of disdain. One legendary incident highlights the clash perfectly. Sinatra, in a foul mood, arrived backstage and began making demands. He wanted specific lighting, a different dressing room, and he wanted the show's schedule changed to suit him. The producers, used to placating stars, were in a panic, but Johnny stood his ground. He sent a message back to Sinatra's camp. "This is the Tonight Show. I'm the host. He's a guest. He'll be treated well, but he will be treated like a guest." Sinatra was reportedly so incensed by this pushback that he nearly walked out. The interview that night was visibly tense. Carson was polite but distant, and Sinatra, for once, seemed off his game. It was a silent battle of wills, and Johnny won. He proved that no one, not even old Blue Eyes, was bigger than his show. For a man who controlled every room he entered, Sinatra had met his match in the quiet, stoic host from Nebraska. The fact that Carson held his ground against one of the most powerful men in entertainment, a man with rumored connections that could make careers disappear, is a wow factor in itself. It speaks volumes about Carson's own power and integrity. But if Sinatra was a simmering pot of tension, comedian Jerry Lewis was an explosion. Lewis, a comedic genius to many, was known in the industry for being notoriously difficult, arrogant, and deeply insecure. Carson found his on-screen persona grating and his off-screen behavior even worse. Lewis had a habit of taking over interviews, turning what should have been a conversation into a one-man show where he was the only one in on the joke. He would mug for the camera, interrupt Johnny, and treat the entire process with a level of disrespect that drove Carson crazy. Producers recall one appearance where Lewis showed up with a list of topics he refused to discuss, which included his famous split from Dean Martin, a subject of immense public curiosity. During the interview, Lewis was combative and dismissive. When Johnny tried to steer the conversation, Lewis would fire back with sarcasm. The air was electric with animosity. The crew could feel it, the audience could feel it, and you can bet millions at home could feel it too. Carson, ever the professional, managed to get through the segment, but the moment the cameras were off, he made his feelings clear. He told his producer, Fred de Cordova, that he never wanted Lewis on the show again. He called him a truly hateful man. For Johnny, comedy was a craft built on timing and respect. Two things Jerry Lewis seemed to ignore entirely. What you have to understand is that Carson's desk was more than just a piece of furniture, it was a symbol of control. And these two men, Sinatra and Lewis, challenged that control in a way few others dared. What they did was just the beginning. Next, we'll see what happened when Hollywood's most bitter rivalry took center stage. When Hollywood royalty goes rogue. Hollywood has always been fueled by rivalries, but none were as legendary, as bitter, or as long-lasting as the feud between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. Their mutual hatred was the stuff of legend, a story of jealousy and sabotage that spanned decades. Many people are crazy about their iconic films, but they don't know that the on-screen drama was nothing compared to their real-life war. When these two titans of the silver screen sat down on Johnny Carson's couch, they brought all of that baggage with them, creating some of the most uncomfortable moments in television history. First, let's talk about Joan Crawford. By the time she appeared on The Tonight Show, her star had faded from its golden era peak, but her ego certainly hadn't. Crawford was known for her meticulous, almost obsessive control over her public image. But behind the scenes, she was regarded as cold, calculating, and ruthlessly ambitious. Her appearance on one of Carson's earliest shows set the tone for what was to come. She was demanding with the staff, treating them like personal servants, and she had an icy demeanor that put everyone on edge. The thing nobody tells you is that Crawford was a master of the subtle power play. During her interview, she would often steer the conversation back to herself, regardless of Johnny's questions. She would name drop, subtly insult her contemporaries, and present a version of her life that was pure Hollywood fiction. Carson, who had a knack for seeing through phonies, played along, but his staff knew he was not a fan. He saw her not as a legendary actress, but as a deeply insecure woman desperate to cling to her past glory. He once remarked to a producer that Crawford had ice water in her veins. The fact that this Hollywood queen, who commanded sets with an iron fist, was so transparently needy to Carson is a testament to his ability to read people. Then there was Bette Davis. If Crawford was ice, Davis was fire. She was famously outspoken, with a sharp tongue and an opinion on everything. Unlike Crawford, Davis didn't hide her contempt for the Hollywood system or for her rivals. When she appeared on the show, it was always a gamble. Would you get the charming, witty storyteller or the cantankerous legend who was ready for a fight? More often than not, it was the latter. Davis treated her interviews with Carson like a verbal sparring match. She would challenge his questions, correct his facts, and often go on long, rambling tangents that left Johnny struggling to regain control of the segment. She famously loathed Joan Crawford, and she wasn't afraid to let it be known. In one memorable appearance, Johnny innocently brought up a film she had made, and Davis used it as an opportunity to take a thinly veiled shot at Crawford's acting style. The audience gasped, then laughed, but Johnny knew he was playing with fire. His producers held their breath every time her name was on the booking sheet. It was a wow factor for the audience, seeing this legendary actress be so unfiltered, but for the show, it was a logistical nightmare. They never knew when she might say something that would land the network in hot water. For Carson, these two women represented the two ugliest sides of old Hollywood: the cold, manufactured persona of Crawford and the bitter, aggressive ego of Davis. He respected their talent, but he detested the drama they brought with them. They weren't just guests, they were ticking time bombs. But as difficult as these divas were, they were nothing compared to the guests who were completely, dangerously unpredictable. Hollywood's loose cannons. In the world of live television, the one thing a host craves is control. Johnny Carson was a master of it. He could navigate any conversation, salvage any joke, and handle almost any situation with grace. But then there were the wild cards. These were the guests who didn't just ignore the rules of television, they seemed to not even know they existed. Two of the most infamous were Shelley Winters and Mickey Rooney. When they sat on Carson's couch, all bets were off, and the show often spiraled into pure, unadulterated chaos. Shelley Winters was a two-time Academy Award winner, a brilliant actress known for her powerful performances. She was also known for being one of the most unpredictable personalities in Hollywood. She was loud, opinionated, and had absolutely no filter. You see, Winters treated The Tonight Show not as a promotional appearance, but as her own personal stage to say and do whatever she pleased. Her interviews were the stuff of legend among the staff, who would brace themselves for impact every time she was booked. The most famous Shelley Winters moment didn't even involve Johnny directly, but happened right beside him. She was a guest alongside the notoriously hard-drinking actor Oliver Reed. Reed began making outrageously chauvinistic comments, declaring that women belonged in the kitchen. Winters, a staunch feminist, argued with him fiercely. The tension escalated until, in a moment that has gone down in television history, Winters picked up her glass of whiskey and dumped it directly over a stunned Oliver Reed's head. The audience went wild. Carson, caught in the middle, could only sit there in disbelief, a perfect picture of a man who had completely lost control of his own show. While it made for unforgettable TV, for Carson, it was the ultimate nightmare. It was a wow factor moment that still gets talked about today, a physical altercation on what was supposed to be a friendly talk show. Then there was Mickey Rooney. A true child of Hollywood, Rooney had been a star since he was a kid, and it seemed he never quite outgrew the anything for attention mentality. By the time he was a regular guest on Carson, his career was on a downswing, and his behavior had become increasingly erratic. He was known to show up to the studio having had a few too many drinks, and his on-air behavior was often inappropriate and bizarre. Producers tell stories of Rooney being handsy with other guests in the green room, telling off-color jokes that made everyone uncomfortable, and then going on air and delivering rambling, incoherent anecdotes. The thing nobody tells you is that Carson often had to act as a buffer between Rooney and the other guests, and sometimes even the audience. He would try to cut him off, change the subject, or throw to a commercial break just to stop the bleeding. In one instance, Rooney's behavior was so out of line that he was reportedly given a soft ban from the show for several years. Carson had a deep respect for the history of Hollywood, but he had no patience for performers who didn't take their craft or his show seriously. Rooney, in his eyes, was a tragic figure who had become a caricature of himself, and he simply wasn't willing to let that chaos unfold on his stage. For Carson, guests like Winters and Rooney were his biggest test. They weren't just difficult, they were agents of chaos. They threatened the one thing he held most dear, the smooth, professional, and predictable flow of a good television show. But sometimes, the most monstrous guests were the ones who were perfectly polite to Johnny's face. Sometimes a guest didn't have to throw a drink or cause a scene to end up on Johnny Carson's bad side. For some, it was a deeper issue, a clash of values, a profound disrespect for the process, or a personality that was simply grating. These were the quietly condemned, the guests who smiled for the camera but left a sour taste in Carson's mouth. This group includes the genius Orson Welles, the diva Zsa Zsa Gabor, and the politically charged Jane Russell. Their stories reveal a different side of Carson, the man who was not just a host, but a moral judge of character. If the king of late night saw this much darkness, what else are we not seeing? It makes you wonder who the real monsters are today. Let us know in the comments who you think is the most difficult celebrity guest of all time. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more secrets from behind the curtain.